I'm a PhD candidate at the Department of Political Science, and I am the moderator for today's session. In the interest of time, we're going to get started as people continue to log in and join in the conversation. And on that note, I welcome you all to the Rockefeller College Lunch and Learn series. We're pleased to have among us Dr. Tassiana Oliveira, Dr. Daiane Londero, and Dr. Leonardo Geliski join us today. Let me give you all a round of introductions of our panelists. Dr. Daiane Londero is a PhD in public policy, is former visiting research scholar at the University at Albany, analyst at the Brazilian Federal Prosecution Service, and is professor of organized crime and citizen security at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil. Dr. Leonardo Geliski is a PhD in public policy, is former visiting research scholar at the University at Albany, and a specialist in judicial institutions, organized crime, and anti-corruption policy in the Global South. Dr. Tassiana Oliveira is a visiting assistant professor at the Department of Political Science at University at Albany. Tassiana has written extensively on public law and legislation and social reforms and constitutionality in Latin America, with a focus on the Supreme Court of Brazil. Today's Lunch and Learn topic is Combating Organized Crime in the Americas, Perspectives on U.S. Action and Regional Responses. Our panelists today will discuss the fight against organized crime groups in the U.S. and Latin America with a focus on the new policies adopted by the current administration. Before I turn it over to our speakers, I'm going to go over the ground rules. You're all requested to remain muted and hold your questions until the presentation is over. We're going to have time for Q&A towards the end of the panel discussion. You can use the raise your hand function on Zoom or send your question in the chat. If you would like to remain anonymous, you can send your question in a private message to me here, and I will read the question on your behalf. If you submitted a question in advance, I would read it out. And with that, I'm going to invite Dr. Oliveira to kick things off for us.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I'm really glad to have here two of my friends, colleagues, partners, co-authors, so many things that we do together. It's really a privilege to join you as we reflect on one of the most complex issues and urgent issues also facing this hemisphere, the Americas, right? So we are going to try to understand a little bit how states in the Americas are responding to increasingly sophisticated criminal organizations. So to start, I'm going to invite my friend and colleague, Dr. Leonardo Geliski, to share his insights. And then we are going to hear from Daiane also sharing her insights. Then, of course, I'm going to end with some remarks. So feel free, Leo, to start. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. You can hear me, everyone? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a privilege to be back at U Albany to discuss this complex and challenging topics such as fighting organized crime in Americas, specifically when we talk about Latin America. This was one of my research topics when I was a visiting research scholar at U Albany. I am also grateful to Professor Tassiana, my friend and colleague, for this invitation and thoughtful organization. Organized crime is not static and a local phenomenon. And starting with this, I want to say that it's a transnational, adaptive, relational system of criminals organizing themselves, and one of that evolves faster than many of our legal institutional frameworks. When we talk about organized crime, we are not only analyzing illicit profits or relational dynamics. It's about the power to infiltrate, to corrupt, and to govern territories and control markets, illegal or legal. And territories, I mean not only physical space, but for example, where the criminal dynamics happens. It thrives where institutions are weak, where inequality persists, and where the state legitimates filters. Today, I want to explore with you many dimensions, but I will reduce to 4 concepts to our conversation here. One is the conceptual and theoretical frameworks to talk about organized crime, and also the paradigms between the concept of organized crime and the phenomena of organized crime in criminal organizations. A conceptual framework I would like to start our talk is, what is organized crime? Organized crime can be defined as a continual criminal enterprise that exists primarily to profit from illicit activities. And sharing a common definition about from the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, also known as Palermo Convention. One organized crime group is a structure associated of 3 or more people existing over time, which acts in concert to commit crimes for material benefits. And this is a concept more related to a legal definition, those not a phenomenon or a political concept. But the concept goes far beyond the legal definition. It's in essence one analytical and a political construct. We examine how illicit economies, power relations, and governance deficits interact. I will adopt and mention a concept suggested by Anna Sergi, a criminologist, that we must understand organized crime in 3 interrelated dimensions. First one, organized crime as activity or the organization of crime, the complex continuity and the planning of illicit markets. The second one, organized crimes as a structure. And here we have the connection between the legal definition, so the organization of criminals. When we talk about the legal type to criminal organized crime, we are typifying the relation between individuals. So it's the internal arrangement, how the criminal network are structured. And the third one is the legal governance. So this is a major concept, is that where the extent to which criminal groups impose order, control territories, and perform state-like functions. Those 3 layers remind us that organized crime is not a market or a model of governance, but operate as an intersection between legality and illegality. So having this in mind, we have a dual perspective. First one is to understand the different expression of organized crime globally. We can think of 2 or pairings discussions. For example, in Europe, we have the framework organized crime and mafia when we take as one example, the Italian case. In Latin America, we can have the framework organized crimes, gangs, prison gangs, militias, and cartels. For the European paradigm of organized crime, we have a particular case that mafia represents a mature and institutionalized form of organized crime. But here we are not discussing organized crime as a legal definition, but organized crime as a social phenomena, a criminal phenomena we are deal with. Groups such as Casa Nostra's, Cameron's, is not merely criminal organizations. They are systems of individuals that structure beyond powers. They can operate with territorial dominance, cultural codes, political and economic dominance to maintain alliance and to relate with political elites. Those groups are a concept that interact related with the local definition they act. In Latin America, we have other types of criminal phenomena related with criminal groups. Here I am mentioning the projection beyond the concept. For example, in Latin America, we have the structure and logic of organized crime in a pair with prison gangs. Here we call factions or facções, such groups as Primeiro Comando da Capital in Portuguese or Comando Vermelho. In Rio de Janeiro, we also have the figure of militias, né? As well in Mexico, we have cartels, and Central Americas, for example, the Mauras. They operate in a context of state abstancing in social inequalities. We have the dominance over the territories, and where the violence is an instrument of dominance. Rather than drawing the traditional, we have a few concepts that describe them as building the authority through armored control, space, social presence, and informal governance, here related with the definition of criminal governance. Those organizations arise from margins, for example, prison, urban peripheries, borderlands, where the state reach is weak. They establish rules of conduct, dispute resolution mechanisms, systems of punishment, and in some cases, the population is perceived as more effective than offer the actions of formal institutions. Here we have one example that change through time, where we have prison gangs, factions, for example, in Brazil, specifically in South America, that project themselves now as a transnational criminal organizations, crossing borders. While in Europe, we have the concepts of mafia that reflects a vertical structure of power. In Latin America, the facções and militias represents a horizontal, adaptive, and a network forms of control. But however, that demonstrates some principle, organized crime is not merely an economic venture, but is a form of criminal governance, one that reshape the meaning of sovereignty in the territories it occupies and are product of the social and political context they are formed. Sargent and Sartori argues that those groups are not external to society, but deeply embedded within, transforming social space in criminal territories, where legality and illegality coexist and reinforce each other's. I will return to this point because we have a discussion when we talk about organized crimes, is that organized crimes has a symbiotic relation with other types of criminalities, such as corruption and money laundering. One topic I want to highlight with you, going to the response the judicial institutions have to this type of dynamic, is that organized crime, I will call it organized crime below the Ecuador, institutional absorption and conceptual diffusion. When analyzed crime, organized crime below the Ecuador, particularly in South America, is essential to look beyond the criminal codes and to examine how justice institutions, judicial institutions have internalized and operates those concepts. Even before the existence of specific legal provisions defining organized crime, and here I'm taking as a marking point the Palermo Convention, many countries has already created specialized investigative and prosecutorial bodies, such as anti-mafia units, anti-corruption task force, specialized groups, anti-organized crimes groups, financial intelligence units to respond to this type of criminality. In other words, we have practice precede law. Agents adapt and grow to respond to the complexity of the criminal phenomena long before the formal creation of a penal type, a legal type to define organized crime. Later, the Palermo Convention provided a unified standard. We call this movement a horizontal diffusion of the concept of what is organized crime and how to respond it. It offers a common vocabulary, not only to Latin America, but globally, how countries and institutions can organize themselves to cooperate to coordinate actions against criminal groups. And here we have the major concept that structure this type of framework is to understand the macrocriminality dynamic, what Rosie Ackerman will call symbiotic relationship. Latin America organized crime cannot be separated from what scholars call macrocriminality triad, corruption, money laundering, and organized crime. Each element feeds the others. Corruption grants access to impunity, organized crime grants capital, and money laundering integrates capital into a legal economy. Moving to further this, I would like to come to the end of our discussions, is that Palermo Convention structure an international framework to how countries can cooperate to fight this type of criminality. We can call these prohibition regimes or anti-organized crime regimes, where the Palermo Convention adopted in 2000 defined the standard and the cornerstone to the modern fight against organized crime. I would like to say that it represents a paradigm shifting, moving for a fragmented national strategy to a coordinated international system of prevention, criminalization, and cooperation. We have the baseline to form joint teams between countries and judicial institutions. So the key works would be criminalize participation in organized crime groups, establish mechanisms and mutual legal assistance, extradition, straight access to recover anti-money laundering frameworks, and promote international cooperation. Moving this, what we talk is that organized crime cannot be treated only as a social problem or a legal definition, but that moves mechanisms to how we can respond to this. In a global context, now we have coordination mechanisms to operate and fight against organized crimes groups, specifically fighting for moving to what we would call follow the money dynamic. Those frameworks build the same principle that organized crimes transform violence in capital and capital into political power. So therefore, this requires combating required dismantling both the financial flows and the networks that enable them to incapacitate this type of institutions and criminal groups. Generally, to conclusions, we can highlight that organized crime can be understood as a product of a social and political context beyond the legal definitions, but also it thrives the elements that allow them to create roots between societies, such as inequality, feeds on corruption, embody itself in the communities by offering what the state cannot, other protection and livelihood. Our text that is to illuminate the shadows, someone then called them shadow government in a few regions. For example, when we have the state capture like militias models, is not only through the law enforcement, but seek justice, social inclusion, and institutional traits. So to finish, I would like to say that combat organized crime is not simply about fighting criminals, but it's also about rebuild governance, reclaim territories, redefine sovereignty, and also protect and enforce structures so how to respond to these types of criminality. Thank you. I don't know if I passed my time. I was trying to control it. Thank you again. I am open to questions.
It was very good, Leo. Thank you. Now we are going to move to Daiane Londero and hear her expanding the ideas that Leonardo started.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a privilege to be here back to you, Albany, to discuss this complex and urgent challenge, combating organized crime in the Americas. This issue goes far beyond law enforcement. It touches the foundations of governance, economic stability, and democracy itself. Organized crime represents one of the greatest public security challenges in the region. It has evolved from local groups into transnational networks, operating without borders, integrating into multiple markets and institutions. We are no longer talking about isolated drug traffickers or armed groups. We are facing hybrid organizations that combine violence, economic power, and political influence. Therefore, any effective strategy must rely on international cooperation and coordination. Criminal networks do not recognize borders, but our public policies still do. And this asymmetry gives organized crime a strategic advantage. When we look at the responses adopted by countries across the Americas, we can identify two main fronts of confrontation, the territorial one and the financial. The first seeks to regain control over our areas dominated by criminal groups, often through militarized operations. The second aims to strike at the economic heart of these organizations by tracking, blocking, and recovering the financial assets that sustain them. Historically, however, governments have prioritized territorial control while neglecting financial disruption, a mistake that has had deep and lasting consequences. Let us begin with the territorial approach. It's in several Latin America's countries, including Brazil, attempts to reclaim territories have really heavily on the militarization of public security. Initiatives such as UPPs, pacificating policies units in Rio de Janeiro, sought to restore state presence through force. In practice, however, these strategies failed to dismantle organized crime. In many cases, they produce the opposite effect, fragmental criminal structure and pushing them toward greater specializations, interconnections, and corporate-like organizations. What we witnessed was a structural transformation of crime itself. In Rio de Janeiro, the UPP project sought to combine police presence with social policies to recover control of communities under drug faction rules. Yet corruption, lack of sustained social investment, and excessive use of force produced the opposite outcome. In the vacuum left by the state, militias emerged, groups composed largely of former and off-duty security agents who became to control territories and exploit local populations economically. These militias established the true urban fiefdoms, charging protection fees and monopolizing services like as gas distribution, transportation, and internet access. They became, in a sense, public militias, extensions of the state that operates outside legality. This phenomenon reveals the crisis of territory recovery policies. Such approach treats organized crime as a purely military problem, ignoring its economic and institutional dimensions, while the state focuses on controlling physical territory. Organized crime strained its position in the financial sphere, diversifying activities and consolidating economic networks. That brings us to the second and most neglected front, financial combat. The absence of effective asset tracing and money laundering prevention policies allowed organized crime to become more sophisticated, infiltrating legitimacy economic change such as fuel, beverage, and tobacco. We now see a financialization of organized crime. These organizations not only expanded into legal sectors, but also into new illicit markets, including environmental crimes. A strict example is the so-called narco-garimpo, illegal gold mining financed by drug trafficking networks in the Amazon. This activity exposed the dangerous fusion on environmental destruction and criminal economy. Gold, timber, and minerals have become new currencies of transaction crime. By failing to target the financial core of these operations, states have allowed criminal organizations to penetrate legitimate production chains, using shell companies to launder money and legitimize profits. Crime has ceased to be just a matter of violence. It has become a matter of markets. When we map organized crime across the Americas, we find a variety of typologies, as Leo just explained. There are small, loosely structured groups dedicated to opportunistic crimes, often serving as entry points into larger networks. There are also private militias present in countries like Colombia, Mexico, and Brazil that exert territorial control under the guise of providing security. There are also public militias composed of co-opted and corrupted state agents, a phenomenon especially visible in Brazil. In some Brazilian states, there's clear evidence of collusion among policy, militias members, and politicians, reflected in rising rates of police lethality. In such cases, organized crime does not merely challenge the state, it infiltrates it. Another model is that of the cartels, particularly in Mexico. These organizations control every stage of trafficking, from production to distribution, while exerting significant influence of political authorities and security forces. In Central America, particularly in Northern Triangle, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, there exists a dangerous combination of cartels, gangs, and state corruptions. Groups like MS-13 and Barrio 18, which originated in the United States, took root in these countries, transforming into parallel power structure. Finally, there's in Brazil case, which has distinct characteristics. The two domains factions, the PCC, First Command of Capital, Primeiro Comando da Capital, and CV, Red Comando Vermelho, were born inside the prison system. They were self-protection groups of inmates, but they soon evolved into complex multi-level criminal organizations operating nationally and internationally. The PCC has developed a quasi-corporating structure, decentralized, well-organized, and financially powerful. That today it infiltrates legitimately in the economy chains, including logistics, transport, fuel distribution, and agribusiness. The CV, on the other hand, maintains a model based on territory control and the imposition of fear. It dominates communities, enforces rules, restricts freedom, and interferes with daily life. While the PCC seeks invisibility and profit, the CV seeks control and local power. Both illustrate the evolution of organized crime in Brazil, from prison-based networks to complex systems embedded in the economy and politics. Moving forward requires a shift of focus. Combating organized crime must prioritize financial intelligence, institutional integrity, and social prevention. This means straining cooperation among financial intelligence units, environmental authorities, customs service agencies, and anti-corruption bodies. It also means recognizing that criminal thrives where the state is weak, not only in force but in legitimacy, and investing in education, infrastructure, and public service is not merely a complement to security. It is the core element of it. In sum, combating organized crime in the Americas requires an integrated dual strategy that combines territorial presence with financial disruption. Controlling physical space is not enough. We must also cut off the economic flows that sustain this network. The challenge lies in moving beyond reacting militarized responses toward coordination of policies based on intelligence, accountability, and social inclusion. At this juncture, corruption between the United States and Latin America can make a difference, not in the form of intervention, but partnership, a joint effort grounded in trust, transparency, and shared objectives. This is not only a matter of public security, but a governance, legitimacy, and democracy. The capacity of our states to confront organized crime will determine not only the safety of the Americas, but the future of democratic coexistence across the continent. Thank you, Tassiana.
Thank you, Dai. Thank you, Leo. And when I proposed this topic earlier this semester, I was thinking of the expansion of some policies of the United States over trying to control the expansion of cartels, especially from Venezuela, some from Colombia as well. And the new administration's policy involves also the use of military force in the Caribbean seas and getting closer and closer to the states, to the actual land of Latin America, especially in Venezuela. So again, what we see is the use of force and militarization against organized crime groups. And my colleagues here are saying that this type of policy is at least too short since the beginning of this type of organized groups. When they started to grow, this has been the main policy: attacking, locking them up, or honestly killing, like we saw recently in Rio de Janeiro, a police operation that left 120 plus people dead in one favela. But did the organized crime groups died or evaded or disappeared? No. So what my colleagues are proposing is that ideally governments should treat this problem as a problem of institutional integrity. Is also a social problem and a finance problem. The problem of democracy, like Daiane highlighted at the end. So to finally get to the point, we must understand that organized crime groups operate between legality and illegality within legal structures, legal markets, and states. So if we want to actually find solutions for this problem, again, I'm going to use Diane's words. Policies should integrate institutional integrity, financial intelligence, and social prevention. Those are just some highlights from what I gathered. Sorry, Renee. Just a few highlights that I gathered from Diane's and Leonardo's words. I think that we are ready to move to questions, right? If there I can start with the questions that came before in Portuguese, if you are okay. How are you going to do that? Is that okay?
Yeah, maybe you can start us off, Professor Oliveira, and then there is a question in the chat. I'm gonna read it for us later.
Okay. So I'm going to start with the question that came in Portuguese earlier. So I translated to English. You guys, you have the question in Portuguese there. the questions are, what is the outlook for the actions of public security agencies in the current context of the growth of criminal organizations, especially regarding intelligence? And what is the actual role of state intelligence in confronting this type of situation? And I think the second question is connected. What do public policies, what kind of public policies they suggest for addressing criminal factions? I think the last one, actually, Daiane just answered, the type of public policies that integrate these three main paths, right? Attacking, protecting institutional integrity, using financial intelligence, and social prevention. But in the first one, do you guys want to answer? Any of you?
Tassi, can you repeat the question, the first question that came about the pub security and how we can overcome this challenge?
Yes. What is the outlook for the actions of public security agencies in the current context of the growth of a criminal organization,
Okay.
specifically regarding intelligence? So what is the outlook of for the actions?
I think it's an important question when we think about criminal organizations. Specifically, I cannot talk exactly about other countries, but taking Brazilian experience, we have fragmented actions between the judicial system and what we call the public security system. If we overlook this is someone called the complex judicial systems, where we integrate and consider the police force as a part of the judicial system, not only the related to public security. We have different response that not go through exactly legal reforms. For example, in Brazil, we have the specialization process as a dynamic to respond to this type of criminality. The public prosecutor office in Brazil created in 1995 a special group to respond to organized crime in Sao Paulo, also known as a special group against organized crime, in Portuguese, commonly called GAECOS. These groups are specialized to prosecute organized crime and also build intelligence activity from the public prosecution offices, but it's not related with the police force. It's a specialization to prosecute this type of crime, or what we can say is that the prosecutor acting as a gatekeepers of this type of criminality. But in Brazil, we have a challenge. We only have the legal definition of organized crime as a criminal type, considered as a crime specifically in 2013. So it's recently we have this type of crime. But judicial institutions create specialized groups despite this lack of legislation to respond to this type of criminality. Also, a few police departments create specialized structures to respond to this type of criminality. This is a part where we have specializations as a form to build institutional capacity to respond to this type of crimes, and also to this, what we call criminal networks. But specifically, the intelligence activity focus in financial crime. So we have the structure when we think about the cycle of organized crime. I mentioned about the symbiotic relationship we have corruption and money laundering. So in Brazil, consider we have organized crime, we have corruption together, linked with this type of criminality. But when we focus on public security, we have a disconnection in how these network is structured to respond to this type of violence. For example, Rio de Janeiro, we have this last operation, and we have a lack of communication between the different forces of police and also prosecution offices. So we are not focused in the information part, but we are focused to occupy territories, but not specifically when you try to occupy territories, what you would place after that. Are you going to provide a public security structure, or, for example, connection between access to social policies and also access to a structure of what they call public security capacity to respond and control this territory and provide public goods and service. Probably Daiane can talk a bit more about this, but I think we have a coordination problem when we talk about the challenge to face and to fight organized crime. But also, we have a core body of legislation that allow us to construct mechanisms to respond to this complexity. Specifically, internationally, when we talk about the US and other countries, we have cooperation as the main topic. We have instrument to build joint teams, task force. When we talk about anti-corruption actions, we can mention, for example, car wash operation. Car wash operation were based in Palermo Convention and the agreements of cooperation between countries. So we are talking about fighting another type of criminal organizations, a criminal organization related specifically with state capture and corruption. But I would like also to highlight a thing is that when we talk of Brazil and what we call blood type of crimes, violent crimes, we have criminal organizations as a general classification. But when we talk about factions, we have a social phenomenon and an organized crime group that go beyond the legal definitions, like an institution itself. Comando Vermelho, CV, Red Command, or First Command of Capital, PCC, born in São Paulo, project itself beyond the legal definition, but as a criminal institution itself that configure or can be defined as a transnational organized crime group. Daiane, would you like to complement?
Yeah, just public security agencies are shifting toward intelligence-driven, coordinated, and preventive strategies. So state intelligence must act as the central node for information production and strategic guidance, while public policies must combine repression, but financial disruption and institutional coordination and social prevention to effectively confront organized crime in Brazil. So we don't have here a problem that we can call terrorism or that we have a security problem. So intelligence must to guide the actions in public security agencies here.
Thank you, Daiane. Just highlighting Daiane is doing the work of intelligence in the agency that she works for. Shrina, you've mentioned before that you had a question.
Yeah, we have a question in the chat, so I'm gonna read it to all of you. We have a question from Nina, and Nina's asking, given the recent attacks by the US in the Caribbean and the legacy of US overreach in regime changes in Latin America, what kind of predictions are being made about the US using organized crime as a pretext to justify US political interventions in Latin American affairs? So whoever who wants to take that up.
I think I'd like to answer to this one. Nina, thank you for your question. Nina is always present. So that's one of the things that drove me into proposing this topic, the US attacks in the Caribbean. And I believe that the main issue here, I don't think that we had time to elaborate too much on that. It's language. So see that we are talking about organized crime groups. We are talking about factions. But when we look into American policies, they're calling it narco-terrorists or narco-terrorism. When you define the work of such groups as terrorism, we of course, you don't have a public security problem anymore. Now it's a national security problem, and you can use the military to resolve it. So not all states in Latin America agree with this definition, and the United States now is imposing its policy over the countries. What can we expect? What kind of predictions are being made? Well, I don't like I don't like embracing predictions because it's really difficult to predict what's going to happen, especially in coming from this administration. But I believe what people are talking is that this is it's a way of advancing the American power over Latin America, like a new Monroe Doctrine, a 2025 version, something like that. And especially taking control over the government of Venezuela, taking down Maduro's government. So those are ideas that are being discussed around. This is to be seen. I don't know if I would affirm that this is going to happen. If he is going to take down Maduro's government, he is going to advance the American power over Latin America using the force. But those are fears. And Brazil, for example, is afraid that this incursion over Venezuela especially is going to create a problem of immigration that is already happening. But Venezuelans are already fleeing the country for years, but it's going to increase faster the problem of immigration coming from Venezuela to Colombia and to Brazil, the neighbors of Venezuela. I don't know if you guys would like to add, or I'd just say that we have just a few minutes left.
I'd like just to compliment Tassi. I think one important point and a challenge is that in Latin America, when we classify organized crime is treated as a structured definition and not related or attached to a type of crime like terrorism. We have, for example, in Brazil, what we call legal complex of crime types related to criminal networks, and associated with terrorism is one of them, but it's not the definition of organized crime. And when you put organized crime as terrorism, you created a crackdown in how the criminal procedures operate between countries, how cooperation can be done. You affect the whole structure beyond borders. For example, we have a large structure to what we call the dynamic of follow the money, how to fight organized crime through prosecute financial crimes and money laundering. And when we do that, specifically, we are, I don't know in English, how can I say this, but we are, Tassiana, you can help me, fragilizando the structure of how legal agents act.
Awakening
Awakening, I forgot the word. Awakening how the legal agents act in this prosecutor process. I would like just to highlight this. We've returned to the starting point what organized crime is and how we define it. We took this in recent years, we define what organized crime is and agree with that definition and create mechanisms to cooperate and coordinate to fight this type of criminality. When we put terrorism in the table, we can affect how these mechanisms operate. and how judicial institutions across the globe respond to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we can end with one last question, if that's okay. So with the intensified focus on targeting organized crime in the Americas, do you guys think that the US foreign policy now is giving more attention to the Latin American region? Because in the past, we have heard that US foreign policy uh, of the past administrations has focused more on Beijing than on its neighbors in the Americas. And what do you guys think are the geopolitical implications for foreign policy that you foresee with this renewed focus on the region?
That's a very good question. And this question reminds us of the recent relationship between the United States and Latin America. The past administrations, I believe all the way up to the 90s, basically, they forgot about Latin America in a sense of being more invested in controlling some of the policies or investing more in some countries. And it allowed for an expansion of the relationship between the countries in Latin America with China, which is, if not the number one, number two main partner of most countries in Latin America right now. I think that because of that, the light went red and released a sign to the current administration that, hey, we need to go back there and take back our backyard. That image that Latin America is the United States backyard is in the minds of some of the officials in this current administration. But I hope that the main form of policy, of foreign affairs policy, is not this one of the use of military force in Latin America. There are other strategies like the use of intelligence. Countries in Latin America could use help with some agencies exchanging ideas on how to best use the intelligence to combat organized crime groups, or using the legal structures that are already there, like Leo highlighted, and follow the money, try to find the money. But what do you guys want to, do you guys want to add anything?
I would like just to express that I don't think we have now focus in Latin America in fighting organized crime, because US is an important partner from Brazil and Latin American countries to fight organized crime through the mechanism we talk about, this Palermo Convention system that court created and regulated mechanisms as coordination, cooperation structures, joint teams, intelligence activities to share information about criminal groups. I think it's more like now we are seeing the highlight in the public speech about this agenda to fight organized crime. But before that, we have the judicial institutions from US, from Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay cooperated and promote this agenda to fight criminal groups, specifically cross-border, and Daiane highlighting that in her speech against environmental crimes, like I don't know in English, Tassi, you can help me. Narcogarimpos, I don't know in English, illegal mining, probably illegal mining, drug trafficking in the regions. But I think it's more like this agenda is expressed in the public speech, but the institutions were working before that, and they have a build and straight relations and have joint teams, task force already since the Palermo Convention implementation. So it's how can I say this, is a long-term agenda in the region and in a cooperation mechanism between US and South American specifically countries.
Yes, the legal framework is there, the agencies are working, but the speech is of the current administration seems to forget that all of this legal structure.
Yeah,
I
you
think
were
we have
perfect.
it.
Yeah.
I think we have it.
Yeah.
Great, great. Thank you so much. We have reached the end of today's discussion. I want to thank our panelists for sharing their insights on this important topic, and I want to thank you all for attending. We learned about the conceptual definitions of organized crime and transnational crime and the international conventions to fight organized crime. And we also learned that it is to do with a structural transformation of the crime itself, with the vacuums left by the states, with the control of territories by militias, and how organized crime in the region is a financial problem, but it is also a social and a governance problem. So I want to thank you, all of you, again for attending. I just want to highlight that we're going to have a next Lunch and Learn on November 24th. So I look forward to seeing you all then. Goodbye and have a good day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.